Wouldn't it be nice if Adam Sandler didn't count the dates up all so wrong? And wouldn't it be nice to talk together in a format that goes way too long? You know it's time to rewind, baby, for 19 dates of this movie with Drew Barry. Yeah, wouldn't it be nice? Good morning, listeners. It's another beautiful day here on It's Time to Rewind. I'm your host, Bubbawheat, and joining me today is my guest, Heather Baxy Walsh. How are you doing today?
I'm magical, thank you. How are you?
I am doing very good. This has been a fun 3 weeks. I'm sad that this is your last week here. And this season we are discussing, I forgot the movie again. What was it?
50 First Dates.
Oh, right.
You'd think you'd know that by now, right?
Yeah, you'd think like 10 episodes in, 12 episodes in. But, well, actually it is 19 first dates. And we are going through them one date at a time. And this week's date is what I'm calling their 10th date, because it's their 10th interaction, even though we don't actually get to see their date or possible non-date. It's tough to know what it is because it all happens off screen. But it does start at 45 minutes and 21 seconds with Henry tied up in the back of his truck, and it ends at 47 minutes and 16 seconds with Henry asking Doug and Marlin the exact question the audience probably is. So I know we kind of talked last week that this is by far the most manipulative of Henry's schemes, where he is pretending to be a potential kidnap victim with the full-on ropes tied up and the duct tape over the mouth.
I had completely forgotten about this part while I was watching it too. So last week was the fantastic beating of the bat, Rob Schneider. So, you do have, it escalates to some degree, but I had completely forgotten about this one, and I just saw him, I was like, what is he doing? No, stop it. It's funny though. It is. It's bad, but it's funny. Don't do that.
And especially, and I think that it does help because he immediately takes the steam out of it whenever he sees that it's not Lucy coming, even though he doesn't recognize Doug and Marlin's car, and he sits up and he's like, it's okay, I've already called the police.
Yeah, with the newspaper, I think he has in his hands.
Yeah.
And he's just talking through the duct tape, which is totally plausible, by the way. My mom has duct taped my mouth when I was a child a few times.
Yeah, you just basically talk through your nose.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. You can do it. But yeah, he's just sitting there like it's fine and dandy. And then I forgot how great Sean Astin is in this too. I think he like with his
he says you weren't expecting this, and then he's just sitting there kissing his bicep.
Yeah, he's like, with his mesh midriff shirt on.
Yes, I have talked many times about how much I love Sean Astin in this role, but I'm welcome to hear.
He's wonderful.
Yeah.
He's so funny. It's so good.
Yeah, it is just always a treat whenever he shows up in this movie. And I think, I don't give enough credits to, I don't even think I've mentioned the name of the actor, but the guy that plays Marlin, because I feel like he's kind of a perfect straight man to Sean Astin's Doug.
Yeah, he has a bit of that ornery thing going on, but at the same time, I don't know, I kind of like curmudgeons and hermits, so I feel like if they just let me in their house, I'd be like a cat and they'd eventually like me. So when you get those 50 something, 60 something guys like that, I always think that they're sweet no matter how grumpy they are on the outside. But he is sweet.
Yeah, and this is really the part in the movie where he starts to warm up to Henry, because he, like, you think that Henry's going to get in trouble, but, like, one thing, he says, after you're done pulling this kidnap crap with my daughter, then come by the house. So, like, immediately you realize that he's not stopping Henry. Like, he's actually allowing Henry to go through with whatever scheme that he's going to do. So he does actually see and interact with Lucy after Doug and Marlin leave.
Yes. And you know that because when she's painting and she's singing, he says she's always like this afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the Beach Boys song, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's Wouldn't It Be Nice?
Wouldn't it be nice? Yes.
That's the I do a parody of it for the opening of every episode this season.
Oh, that's fantastic. I sing it as terribly off key and poorly as Lucy, actually worse. So I won't hurt anyone's ears on the show. But it is.
I did my best to be as not nearly as bad as Lucy, but I'm definitely not a singer by any stretch of the imagination. And I mean, I think that there are certain songs I can get away with, but this is not really compatible to my vocal range at all.
That's awesome. That makes it even better. It makes it more fun. That's the joy, though. Singing. Yeah. That's why I sing, but that is also why I sing with the radio way up. I sound so good then.
Yeah, it's always nice whenever you always sound better whenever you're only 10% of the noise.
Exactly. One thing that I've always thought about, though, is people always said I sound better in the shower. I don't know how that's possible. It sounds like a lie to me. You echo more. You're louder. There's nothing else to drown you out. It's you. Yeah, I don't sing in the shower. That's how I found out how I really sound. It's bad.
Well, I think in theory people say that because for at least for some people you have fewer inhibitions, and so you're able to really like belt it out. But I also don't sing in the shower, so I wouldn't know for sure.
I've never known anybody that does. I've lived with a lot of people over the years. I don't think I've lived with a roommate that sang in the shower. But now I'm curious. I think that I'm just going to randomly start asking people this. I know that it's totally inappropriate, but I'm going to anyway.
No, it's hire one of those Family Feud.
Yeah, Bubba brought me on the show, and now we're interviewing people about whether or not they sing in the shower. My bad.
Hire one of the Family Feud survey takers to add that to their list.
Oh, that's a good one. See, you have a clever way to solve this problem, so I don't have to get in as much trouble.
Yeah, and then we end up getting this whole backstory of this Wouldn't It Be Nice song, the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
And it's really sweet, even though with the added comedy of Drew Barrymore's like very loud and very off-key singing of Wouldn't It Be Nice.
But again, it's joyous. And that's just one of the things that I love about Drew Barrymore, and I always have anyway. It's literally impossible not to like her. She's just so bloody sweet. And this is a perfect character for her because she just gets to glow. I don't know anybody else that could have played this part any better than her.
Yeah, and also with this story, I actually really love this added detail, and I think that this is something that people might miss. But Marlin tells this story about how anytime he would go out to sea, Lucy would give him the Beach Boys tape because it would remind him of his wife, which would encourage him to come back home sooner. And Marlin does the exact same thing. He gives Henry this same album because it will remind him of Lucy, and it actually does get him to come back sooner.
Yeah, it's so romantic. It really is. It's so sweet. Again, it's Adam Sandler. I mean, it's like a couple scenes ago, we're talking about pooping ourselves. And then here we are, this like lovely, real moment. It shouldn't work, but it does. I love it.
Yeah. And then I feel like this scene ends with two questions that the audience are asking in their heads right about now. Because Marlin asks Henry the question, like, what do you get out of these interactions with Lucy? Like, he's asking him a legitimate question, and I do think, like, do you agree that this is something that the audience is probably thinking right about now?
Yeah, because okay, in fairness, it's human nature to anything you invest in to have something that comes back to you from it. It's just a natural thing, particularly relationships. They're give and take. He is putting an exorbitant amount of effort into very, very small and strange interactions with her. And she's wonderful and delightful, and we love her. And they know how wonderful she is because they love her too. So yeah, is he a weirdo? Is he a creep? Or is he just that sweet?
Yeah, and his answer is definitely on the sweet side, and this
Yeah.
is definitely something to get the audience on his side, where he basically just says, I get to spend an hour a day with her, and wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really romantic. It's really romantic, and it's Adam Sandler, but it is. I love it. I think it's the vulnerable. He always does these really, really vulnerable characters so well. And he has like this boyish nature about him, but you don't think that he's just a boy either. He's still a man. He gets better with that in later years, I think, obviously. But it's, I don't know. It's just sweet.
Hmm.
That's the best. It's trite, but it's so true. It's just so sweet.
Yeah, I think that, um, I mean, again, I can't speak to the Wedding Singer, or maybe some of his other movies where he can play a sweet character, but I feel like in terms of the movies that I've seen, this is definitely the sweetest character that he plays, and I feel like it has the smallest amount of like Adam Sandler isms to him.
Yeah, yeah. Which really didn't start. It probably started not too long after this, where he started to do a lot more dramas, and we got to see the complete and utter antithesis of this kind of character, and still do, because he's actually a very talented actor. But I think I've seen a lot of them, and I think this is probably one of the characters I think is the sweetest and most sincere. I think that's why this movie works. I don't think this movie could work if it wasn't that sincere. Even The Wedding Singer, it's a better movie than this is, but it's not as sweet. I like these characters more.
Yeah, even though I still think it's so bizarre that they really tried to push making the audience think that Henry is this big womanizer, but it's like they spend so much time in the beginning setting that up, and then they just immediately drop it as soon as Lucy shows up.
Yep. Yep.
Which I think that's fine. I don't really want him to be a womanizer character, but I almost think that this movie would have worked just as well if Henry started off being a nice guy, like a nice guy that just was unlucky in love, rather than being this big womanizer that falls for a local.
Yeah, I agree. That part is entirely unnecessary, and it's also really, really, really common to see that kind of trope play out this way on both sides too. You've seen it with women who don't settle down, and they're career women, and they don't have time for love and that kind of thing, and then they flip the switch entirely. It's not always necessary, but it's just a way of, I think, showing how much he actually cared. But in this one, not necessary.
Yeah, and then this scene ends with Henry asking a question that I'm sure the audience is thinking. He throws it back to Marlin and Doug and is asking him what happens whenever Lucy looks in the mirror and she sees that she's 10 years older, and the part that he doesn't say but is implied, it's like, seeing the same newspaper won't exactly work in that situation anymore. And then Marlon says that, every day he wakes up afraid of that situation happening.
Yeah. actually one of the things I remember most clearly about this movie was this exact scene in this exact moment, because I remember being in the theater watching it and going, yeah, like this is fine and nice and sweet now, but there's long-term consequences. You have to do something. But it kind of made me a little angry at them I felt like it was a little selfish at the time. And instead of thinking or planning, I mean, what Adam Sandler Henry eventually starts to do is so sweet and wonderful and great. But you kind of wonder, why didn't they try and do something at that point? But, they were grieving too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's kind of implied that they're not necessarily the brightest.
Yeah.
That
Definitely
they're just
definitely Johansson.
yeah, definitely not Doug. Doug's not going to come up with the videotape solution.
No. But there was a realistic moment where it's a real question. It's a real question, and it's a legitimate one.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense in this situation that they've kind of fallen into this routine, and it's like for them it works for now, and they're not going to worry about then until now doesn't work anymore.
That's actually what a lot of people do in so many scenarios too. It's very human to do that. It's not the best or easiest thing or the best thing to do always, but I think it's probably more natural to do that in a lot of circumstances with difficult things. I think we do that. I think we put things aside and say, I'll deal with that tomorrow. Sometimes tomorrow ends up being a really long time.
Yeah. I definitely feel that. But one other thing that I wanted to mention that this reminded me of, because, I am doing this whole season as kind of a weird companion piece to Memento. And it's not something that shows up in the movie Memento, but in the original short story Memento Mori that Memento is based on, it actually does have that. It does play into that concept late in the story where Earl, which in the short story the Leonard character is named Earl, he has a moment where he does see himself in the mirror. And he does recognize that he's much older, but he still has this condition. And I think that's kind of a powerful scene to end on in that short story. And I think it's interesting that they do kind of touch on that concept in this movie as well.
Yeah, well, and they fully explore it in this one. And they go at it head on, because that's exactly what happens is, how do you manage this relationship? You can't start over every single day, can you? And if you are going to, how are you? I mean, there are so many questions. It's insanely complicated. So yeah, I mean, that's part of the thing that I think is interesting about it. It's a really, really good point. And again, it's just such a human thing to think about. So that's why I think everybody can connect to it.
Yeah, and then there is one other question that I've been asking. I think pretty much everybody. I can't remember if it came up with Condra, my previous guest, but she doesn't show up in these scenes. But I know you did say that you've rewatched the movie. But I did want to take a moment to talk about the character of Alexa and like what you thought about that character and how she's represented as a character in this movie and how you think that she would be represented if they made this movie today, because in a way she's almost could have been a non-binary character.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Wow. Yeah, they could have addressed that a little bit more head on. I didn't even think about that, though. That's a really good point.
Yeah, because she is, and I do refer to her, and I mentioned this before, I refer to her as a she because in this movie I think it's pretty clear that, she's just a masculine-looking woman.
Yeah, and I think just because that's how I've seen her the first few times I watched it. And then, by the way, I've seen this movie multiple times, but it's been many, many years before I watched it again recently. But yeah, I think maybe that was it. I just saw it as being that character, and like you said, the female that's overly masculine and kind of making fun of that. Yeah. I didn't even think about it, that she could totally be a non-binary character. They could have done that well too, instead of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they, the humor around it doesn't age too well, but
No.
I think that for the time, it's actually not that bad, at least from my perspective as a cis white male. That I only tangentially have trans people in my life, which I appreciate and am supportive as much as I'm able to with all the ones that I do interact with, and the relatives of people that I interact with. But like I feel like it works okay in this movie just because they're always so positive, and she's always so positive.
Yeah,
and
it's not. It's not mean. It doesn't feel mean spirited.
Right. Yeah.
And by the way, my daughter is trans, so. And I didn't stop watching this again and go, I didn't even roll my eyes. It was, I mean, it's a little cringy, I think is the way I describe it. But I think you're right. They're positive. They're happy characters. It's just not mean spirited. So it has not aged well. No, but I don't think it's mean or nasty.
Right. I agree with that. And, I'm glad to hear somebody else's perspective as well. And that's all I have. Do you have anything else that you wanted to say about this scene, or anything else about this movie in general?
Oh, I don't like romantic comedies. I'm just not a romantic comedy girl, and this is one that I always think of as one of the good ones. It's really, really great. It's sweet, it's sincere, and it's so fun. And I was so glad to rewatch it again. I was really excited when you asked me to come on, so thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's always fun talking with you, and I was glad to have you on, even though I did have to, you did have to lose a couple episodes due to, scheduling and health issues. But
stupid COVID, yeah.
But I'm glad that I did manage to get you on, and with the delay, you're finally, like you said before we started recording, you're finally sounding pretty much 100% now.
Yeah, I feel like my voice is finally back to normal. It was like 2 months where it was some days I couldn't talk at all. Can you imagine me not being able to talk? How difficult that was? My poor family. Well, I mean, when I couldn't, they were super happy, but no, it was really frustrating and tough. But yeah, so I'm glad to be back to normal. I'm glad to be here, and I really appreciate you being patient with me too.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks so much. And one last time, why don't you let everybody else know where you can be found online?
Oh, you can find my podcast, which is tons of fun. My friend Mark and I are doing a Buffy rewatch show called Word of Hellmouth. You can find it on rabbitholepodcast.com or on any of your streaming services. We're going through all of the episodes of Buffy, one episode at a time. We're in the middle of season 2 right now. I think our next episode is going to be surprise. Ooh.
And I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me on all the social media where I'm at Bubbawheat. I'm currently most active on Instagram and Threads, I would say, where I share a lot of screen caps and occasional clips, mostly from Fight Club, but also I do try to share some from this movie as well on there, so that's a lot of fun. And I also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, and you can join that to discuss episodes as they come out, as well as have discussions about other time loops, movies, TV shows in general. And until next time, I will see you again for breakfast next week.
What's gonna happen down the line? Someday she's gonna wake up and look in the mirror and notice her face has aged 10 years overnight.
You know something, Henry? I worry about that every damn day of my life.